I call the Minister of Health and Wellness for the second reading debate.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the Optical Council Amendment Bill 2026 be read a second time. This amendment has become not only urgent but absolutely necessary. This bill is not just about amending an existing piece of legislation, it is about correcting a legislative blunder committed by the previous government. A blunder that has compromised the legal integrity of the Optical Council itself, damaged the reputation of our health system, and most disturbingly inflicted real human harm. A law that was illegal from the very beginning. Madam Speaker, let us call a spade a spade. The Optical Council Act 2021, as enacted by the previous administration, is legally flawed. It created a council structure that was unlawful from the very beginning. The current act makes provision, amongst others, for 3 opticians from the public sector to form part of the Optical Council to regulate the professional conduct of opticians and promote their advancement. Yet, surprisingly, unbeknown to the lawmakers, that there are no full-time opticians employed in the public sector. There never were. In fact, there were 4 opticians who are working on a sessional basis in our hospitals. My ministry has consulted the Attorney General's office and has been advised that these 4 opticians are not deemed to be public officers. This means that the law provided for the composition of a council that could not legally exist. In other words, the very body tasked with regulating professional standards for itself not properly constituted. This is not a technical error. This is institutional illegality resulting from legislative incompetence and left uncorrected for too long. Madam Speaker, as a result of this flawed legal framework, we have witnessed the emergence of what can only be described as an unwarranted grip on the regulation of the profession of opticians by certain opticians of the private sector in Mauritius. In fact, a small group of individuals, emboldened by vague and unchecked powers and ignorance of the authority, have taken control of the council and used it not to uphold standards and promote advancement of the profession, but to protect their own selfish interests, devour competitors, and stifle dissent. The Optical Council even abusively exceeded its legal authority by attempting to influence decision-making with regard to optical retail establishments, an area over which it had no mandate. It went as far as to submit lists to another ministry recommending which optical businesses should be blacklisted from subsidy scheme for spectacles for elderly persons. This led to the arbitrary exclusion of lawfully operating optical shops, businesses that employ several Mauritians and serve thousands of citizens. Is this regulation? No, Madam Speaker. This is abuse of power. This is how regulatory capture operates, and this House will not tolerate such unacceptable conduct. Laws do not exist in a vacuum. They have consequences often on the most vulnerable citizens. Let me share one of the most disturbing outcomes of this flawed legislation, a heritage of the previous regime. Because of the opaque and unjust practices permitted under the current Act, particularly the lack of transparency and integrity in the registration process, several foreign professionals who were invited to work in Mauritius found themselves caught in an irreversible trap. Some were denied registration after passing through flawed and discretionary examinations, while others faced endless administrative hurdles. Worse still, I'm told that some of their spouses and children were deported because the primary applicant's registration was blocked or delayed, not on merit, but due to institutional manipulation and conflict of interest. Is this how we treat professionals who come to serve our people? This is not just regulatory failure, this is gross injustice, and it has happened under the very legislation we now propose to amend. This bill seeks to do what the previous administration failed to do, bring legality, professionalism, fairness, and inclusiveness to the regulation of opticians and orthoptists in Mauritius. We are rectifying the illegal composition of the council by removing the requirements for the representation of public sector opticians. formally recognizing orthoptists, essential vision care professionals, and allowing for their registration and representation, clarifying the definitions of opticians and introducing a definition for optometrists, ending the pre-registration examination system that is currently riddled with conflict of interest and low transparency, and aligning registration with best practices used by other professional councils such as the Allied Health Professional Council and Nursing Council. It is also worthy to note that there are no examinations for registration of opticians in France or in India. Let me remind the House that prior to 2021, opticians were regulated by the Optician Registration Board, and there were no examination, there were no problems, and certainly no abuse. Defining and regulating eye health professionals more clearly by harmonizing, updating, and broadening the categories of professionals eligible for registration under the Council. And finally, we are drawing a clear legal line. The Optical Council will regulate professionals. They have nothing to do with commercial enterprises. Optical retail outlets will continue to be regulated under other appropriate enactments. In doing so, we not only restore legality, we also create a more inclusive and modern regulatory environment that better reflects the multidisciplinary nature of vision care today. Madam Speaker, these amendments have not been drafted in a vacuum. They followed 3 working sessions with Optical Council in May and November 2025. And they also take on board the realities faced by professionals in the field of vision care, patients, and the ministry alike. Madam Speaker, the Optical Council Amendment Bill 2026 is more than a set of technical corrections. It is a statement of principle. It is a repudiation of the incompetence of the past and a restoration of legality, decency, and order in regulation of eye care services in Mauritius. It is a rejection of unilateral control and a promise to both our professionals and our people that integrity and justice will prevail in the governance of health. It is also a timely step forward in ensuring that the legislation is harmonized with best practices, updated to reflect current needs, and inclusive of all qualified professionals in this essential field. Madam Speaker, let me now deal briefly into the principal provisions of the bill and the justification. Clause 3 provides for the inclusion of definitions for orthoptists, foreign orthoptists, visiting orthoptists, and optometrists, that is someone who inter alia evaluates visual acuity and prescribes, fits, and supplies optical appliances, as well as clarify the definition of some other terms. Clauses 4, 5, and 6 provide for inclusion of orthoptists, foreign orthoptists, visiting opticians, and visiting orthoptists to be covered under the Act. Clause 7 and 8 provide for the new composition for the Council by removing representations of public sector opticians, increasing the number of opticians, removing representation from the Optical Association of Mauritius, as the latter is not representative of all opticians in the country, including a representative from the Ministry of Finance and the consultant in charge, Subramaniam Bharati Eye Hospital, and the replacement in case of vacancy. Clause 9 provides for the quorum and frequency of meetings of the Council. Clause 10 provides for an orthoptist to be eligible to be appointed a registrar in addition to an optician. Clause 11 provides for amendment to Part 4 of the Act pertaining to the registration of opticians to include orthoptists, foreign orthoptists, and visiting opticians or visiting orthoptists, and to repeal the requirement for examinations to be conducted by the Council. Clause 12, 13, 14, and 15 provide for inclusion of orthoptists and foreign orthoptists, visiting opticians, and visiting orthoptists in the annual list of professionals. Clause 16, 17, and 18 enable the Optical Council to exercise discipline over the profession of orthoptists. Clause 19, 20, 21, 22 provide for the new membership of the disciplinary tribunal and the manner for the conduct of disciplinary measures. Clause 23 provides for deregistration of orthoptists and foreign orthoptists. Clause 24 provides for appeal to be made by aggrieved orthoptists and foreign orthoptists against the decision of the Optical Council. Clause 25 provides for the offences to be levelled against orthoptists and foreign orthoptists. Clause 26 provides for amended list of pharmaceutical products authorized to be used by optometrists. Clause 27 provides new conditions for the conduct of election of members of Optical Council. Clause 28 provides for qualifications of the different categories of professionals to be registered with the Council. And finally, Clause 29 provides that these amendments shall come in operation on a date to be fixed by proclamation. Madam Speaker, I now commend this bill to the House, not only for the sake of compliance, but for the sake of public interest and professional dignity. Thank you.
Second. Thank you. Break.